Strong Communities. It's Thursday the 6th of June. I'm Councillor Lisa Dimmock and Chair of this community. Is everyone happy to introduce themselves?
Hazel Eilert, the Council Scrutiny Manager.
Wendy Barner, Democratic Services.
Roger Hoggins, Head of Operations.
Carl Tewg, Head of Waste and Street Scene.
David Jackman, Chairman of the Crickhornie Environmental Group.
Andrea Jackman, Secretary of Crickhornie Environmental Group.
Councillor Val Smith, Member for Llanbeddock Ward, Member of the Committee.
Linda Guppy, a Member for Roggett, Member of this Committee. Thank you.
Councillor Jamie Trahan, Member for Overmorrow, Member of this Committee. Thank you.
Councillor Roger Harris, Member for Cresson Ward, Abergavenny, and Member of this Committee.
Thank you all. Has anyone got to declare any interest? No? Okay. And obviously we've got Crickhornie Environmental Group here, Mr. and Mrs. Jackman. Item 4, I'll hand over to you. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you. First of all, just a quick reminder, the Crickhornie Environmental Group is a small group operating in Llanfihangel, Crickhornie. We're here today to talk about litter picking and to update you on the trial that we have been running now for 6 months to try and prevent the need for litter picking, so prevent litter in and around our community. We have around 30 to 40 volunteer litter pickers in our ward. We operate an approach to litter picking which is a little bit different because we don't get groups together for communal litter picks on a regular basis. We leave it to our litter pickers to really judge for themselves when and if their area needs picking. And that, as you'll hear in a minute, that presents some challenges in itself. We do get together once a year for the Spring Clean event, and we also have a social event normally halfway through the year as well to get people together, just to make sure that they realise they're part of a group. Back in November last year, we presented a report to this committee and set a few sort of challenges, I suppose, to the county council on what we felt was needed to tackle the problem of litter at source, because we felt, and we still feel, that there's a danger that Wales becomes dependent on volunteer litter pickers. And we're not, we personally, we don't feel that that may be sustainable in the long term, as the next generation come through maybe. And also because, in a nutshell, it's not tackling the problem at source. So we wanted to see if we could get to the root causes of litter and see what we could do about it. So just a quick word about the scope of our trial. Yeah, that's coming up good. It's a little hard to see, but the orange demarcation there, the orange line, marks the boundary of the Crickhornie ward. And you'll see Llanfihangel Crickhornie there in the bottom right-hand corner. And you'll see that it stretches, the area that we cover stretches right up the Lantoni Valley. It also stretches a good way up the Groeni Fawr Valley. And then, of course, there's the obvious area in and around the village. So, although we are a community, if you've travelled around that area, you'll realise that actually we're a collection of several small communities. And as we'll see from the results so far, that has caused us some problems. It's quite a diverse community. It consists of a number of, obviously quite a lot of agriculture. There's a high degree of tourism as well, and a high dependency on camping and holiday accommodation. There's also quite a lot of people there's quite a lot of second homes in our area. So we have people who own houses but don't live in the community. And then we have in the heart of the village quite an elderly population generally as well, some of whom are retired or semi-retired. And that's partly why we have such a good number of volunteer litter pickers. I think people have time to do it. But again, it presents its challenges when it comes to a trial like this, because people do behave in different ways depending on their priorities. The purpose of the trial, in a nutshell, was to see if we could prevent litter. And we were going to do it particularly through the use of bins and signs. I'll tell you more about those in a minute. And what we were trying to do was to actually change people's behaviour and see if we could, through a combination of messages that we were going to send to people through the signage and through the communications that supported it, see if we could change their natural or their tendency to, for some of them, to chuck litter, particularly out of cars. Most of the litter comes from cars in our area. And very importantly, we wanted to support our volunteers because they feel, a number of them had expressed to us, that it wasn't fair to depend on their efforts without some support by way of trying to actually prevent the litter in the first place. So it was a way of supporting our volunteers as well. Timescale was hopefully to run it for a full year, or possibly through to September 2020. The reason for that is to try and encompass 2 tourist seasons. In setting up the trial, I'll say a little bit about the signs first. These were the signs that we had designed, and it was purposely a mix of we call it the carrot, a nice message, does a lovely place like this deserve litter like that, but also a stick, so quite a punchy message on that one, and also, will your kids inherit your rubbish ideas? And it was interesting, when we designed these, we discussed them as a group, and we voted on which ones to select. There were 12 designs in all, and these were the 3 that the group selected. So a mixture of carrot and stick. We also continued to use some of the ones supplied by Monmouthshire County Council. I think in my report I might have said these are from Keep Wales Tidy. Actually, they're from Monmouthshire County Council, I think. Recently cleaned by volunteers, Keep Monmouthshire Beautiful. So wherever we'd gone and picked an area, we still tend to put these out for a while to remind people that somebody has been along and cleared, and please don't mess it up. The bins themselves, you can see a picture of one there. We selected our bins from a catalogue by Glasden, so we purposely went for a proper bin and mounted it as recommended on a proper post. The bin we chose has, as you can see, a bag hanging down beneath it, which you can clearly see when you drive past. That was intentional. We didn't want to hide the bag because we wanted our volunteers to be very easily able to see if it was filling up, because it's crucial that these bins are kept. It's crucial that these bins are kept properly managed and emptied, and you don't see them overflowing. Each one of the bins, and there were 7 in all throughout the community, was selected. We selected the location carefully by identifying what we called a litter hotspot. And a hotspot was based on our volunteers' experience of where litter tended to be dumped. And normally we put them in lay-bys where cars pulled in to maybe have a cup of coffee or just to chuck litter out of their window. And that's where we chose to put the bins. It was also crucial that one of our volunteers agreed to monitor and manage each bin to make sure the bag was emptied regularly. The orange bags that we used are provided by the council, and any full bags were left by the bin ready for collection by the household waste regular collection. As well as that, some other things we did, we made sure that our volunteers knew what was happening and our group members knew what was happening. The local community council were on board. I personally go to most of their meetings and have a regular slot where I update them on anything that the environmental group is doing. So we tried to get them on board early on, and they were supportive. We did warn them that some of the messages were a little bit punchy and might upset some people. But, you know, they agreed to give us their support, which was important for us. We kept in touch with Monmouthshire County Council, Carl and his team, to try and keep them abreast of what we were doing. Keep Wales Tidy as well. The Abergavenny Tourist Information they actually gave us some money to help. They gave us £400, I think, didn't they? Yeah, £400, I think, to help fund the trial. The Landmark Trust sponsored one of our bins, and McDonald's sponsored 3 of them as well. And Monmouthshire County Council paid for the cost of our signs, so that was all helpful. We did an ongoing social media campaign to try and promote the trial and keep people informed as to what was going on. So, how's it gone? Good news, litter has definitely reduced. We have stretches now in our community that are virtually litter-free. And just by way of demonstrating that, after the last bank holiday weekend, the stretch that Andrea and I pick, I would say we picked maybe 2 or 3 items of rubbish, where previously we would have probably had 10 or 20, maybe more, to collect. So we have got some amazing results in some areas. The trial, we think, the trial has been welcomed or accepted by the majority of residents. They're not terribly vocal with their welcoming and acceptance, because actually, if you think about it, all we've done is remove something which, for many of them, they may or may not have noticed as being a blight on our landscape. So we haven't had loads of letters of support or messages of support. We have had objections, and there's been what we think is a vocal minority, but gosh, they make some noise. 3 emails or letters have been received. 1 of them came direct to us, 2 of them came through the Community Council. And some of the adjectives that have been used, you can see there. Amazingly, one person actually said that they felt that the signs were a worse sight than the rubbish itself, which is just astonishing. We've had people complaining about the bags being left by the bins. I'll talk more about the black bags in a minute, but the orange bags, which is it's just I won't say it's crazy because I've got to be careful. It's surprising when you think that you can now drive down pretty much any road in our community and you will see bin bags outside houses on most days of the week because they put them out for collection. Remember, there's a lot of holiday homes in our area. They don't remember to put them out the day before the collection. They put them out on the changeover day. So you'll often see purple bags and pink bags and black bags left out days before the collection. So it's a common sight. But for some reason, when we put orange bags by a bin, some people think that is unsightly. So we've got some very sensitive people to some of these issues. But we've listened, we've replied to each of their responses and reminded them that it's a trial and reminded them of what we're trying to do and asked them for their ideas. And it's interesting that although there'll be a lot of complaints, there's nobody that's really come back and said, you should be doing this instead to address the problem. Most people have just said they don't like what we're doing. They haven't suggested a good alternative. So we've ploughed on, and the 2 big problems there that we need to somehow address is that the full orange bags do tend to pile up next to the bins, and we are seeing the bins used as a dumping area for black bags as well, household waste. We've looked at where that rubbish comes from, and most of it is camping, we believe. So we have ploughed through some of the bags of rubbish and had the lovely job of sorting out where it came from. A lot of it we think is from campsites in the area, which begs an interesting question: is why aren't the campsites providing those facilities? And that is also quite a sensitive topic, because I'm not sure what the rules are around campsites, but there's no question that some of them are not providing the facilities needed. So, in terms of where we go from here and what conclusions we draw, we've got some encouraging results. We would like to continue the trial, but try to address this issue of bags being cleared promptly. I don't think it's too bad an issue if full bags sit there for a couple of days, but if they sit there, as they have done occasionally, for over a week, then we have a problem. And I can sympathise with people saying, it looks unsightly. So we need to try and find a way of getting the orange bags cleared promptly. We're looking at some new signs for our bins. Why? Because I think in hindsight, we've learned that some of the messages that go with the bins particularly need to perhaps focus on send some other messages. And one of the things that we saw as an example, which is worth sharing with you, I haven't actually got a picture here, but there are signs that the National Park puts up to do with preventing motorcycles riding across the moors around us. And each of those on the bottom has a picture of a camera, and it also has the badges of the police forces in the national park. Now, that gives it weight, it gives it credibility. There are no cameras, but it also makes people feel that they might be being watched. So we'd like to consider some of those ideas as a way of giving our signs some gravity and some weight. We haven't so far replaced any of the signs that have been removed. I should have mentioned that actually, and it did appear on my previous slide, but some of the residents have taken it into their own hands and have actually forcibly removed our signs. So about 25 to 30% of our signs over the 6 months have been removed. We haven't replaced them yet, but after this review of the trial, we are keen to look at putting some signs back in place. Otherwise, we're worried that people will start to think that they can just, a minority will start to think that they can just keep removing the signs. And it might be a good way to test whether it is just a minority or whether there are, a lot of residents that are objecting to it. We'll also go to the local show in August, and we'll be trying to get a better feel for how widespread the feeling is about our trial. But the bottom one here is something we still feel very strongly about. A wider campaign is needed. If our local trial was part of a county or a nationwide campaign, we think that we would have more weight and more support, and that people would think twice. We'd like a campaign that echoes our messages and measures, or maybe we echo theirs, but in the absence of a nationwide or a county-wide campaign, what are those key messages? Interestingly, since I wrote this, we have had an invitation from Keep Wales Tidy, and we will be meeting with them next week, because I gather they are working on a nationwide litter campaign. So we're going to have some input into that, hopefully, next week, but we'll see. And as we said when we met in November, and I think there was good support from this council for this, there has to be some element of enforcement here, even if it's just implied. Because if people think they can litter without any sort of punishment, then there are some people, a minority, that will keep doing it. I think that's it. Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Thank you ever so much for coming back and sharing the results of your trial. Shall I hand over to you, Carl, before I take questions from members, or are you happy for members to ask questions now? Do you want to ask a few questions first?
Thanks. You say when the bins are full, the orange bags are left by the side. Do you have a community council area where full bags could be taken, if you know what I mean? In other words, if the bag is being taken off and a new bag is being put up, can the bag not be taken away to a central point? I know it's a bit more travelling for people, but the bag won't be there then, if you know what I mean.
There is no central point, I don't think, in our community. But I like the idea. And one of the things I've seen, when I've travelled in other countries is central points where there are wheelie bins, large wheelie bins where people could put their rubbish. It might also help to give some of these campers somewhere to put their rubbish as well, but there is no point at the moment in our village, I'm afraid.
Whilst I'm on that, with the campers, have you been around the campsites and seen what facilities they have there? They're obviously, by the sounds of it, if we don't provide any any means of getting rid of the stuff, the council will do it as it's spread out throughout the county.
One of our community councillors has started to do that, and this is why it's a delicate subject, because a lot of these campsites are maybe not licensed, and so we're worried about creating more enemies by putting our head above the parapet too much. And this is I suspect you'll find that throughout Monmouthshire, that there's quite a lot of camping going on, and it may be that those sites, we're pretty sure those sites don't provide the facilities that are needed. The one campsite close to us that we do know about is registered and does provide facilities. So there may be a link there between the two issues. Most of the resistance that we've had for this has come from the valleys, the remote valleys, as I'll call them. The Lantoni Valley and the Groine Valley are both valleys that extend for about 6 or 7 miles. So we've realised that they consider themselves as quite a separate community, and it's quite hard to keep them on board with something like this. They do see them as different rules applying to them, and I don't envy the community councillor whose job it is to try to, tread that line of representing them, but at the same time keeping them on board with some of the community policies.
So they're happy to have litter there?
I don't believe the majority of people are happy to have litter, no. And funnily enough, one of the people that complained vociferously about it initially has now signed up as a litter picker for us. So, I think they realise the logic is if you don't prevent it, then someone has to clear it up. But if the problem doesn't affect them personally, if they're not a picker of litter, they see other people doing it for them, and why would you want to stop that? It's not solving the problem at source, but it's partly why what we're doing is to support our pickers, to show them that there is light at the end of the tunnel.
Councillor Eason, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry I was late. I was held up. You suggested that there may be some... I know the area quite well. You suggested there may be some sites which are, I won't say illegal, but unauthorised. Therefore, if we got a site which is unauthorised, which is taking their rubbish particularly somewhere else, that being aside, if it's an unauthorised site, we've also got concerns about sanitation, numbers of people there, fire risk. Are you suggesting there are quite a number of sites, that kind of areas, they won't be sites, will they, because they won't be authorised, that are operating like that? And what can be done, do you believe, to bring them into line so they will comply with sanitary requirements and health and safety and fire and what for people who happen to stay there, who may feel they're staying there with the right conditions, but they're not actually got the right conditions.
I think I need to, remind the council, the committee, that the scope of our trial is specifically to focus on litter. We're going to report these findings back to the Community Council as well and see, what action, if any, they want to take about it. All I can say so far from the litter trial, we've learned that campers' waste is a problem and is part of what is preventing our trial being more successful. So we're determined to try and fix that so that black bags don't get dumped by bins. And there is another way for the campers to dispose of their rubbish properly.
Can I come back on that? In terms of the black bags are not being put by your bins, what is the responsibility of Monmouthshire County Council in removing those bins? Have you got a responsibility? And if you're taking rubbish from an unauthorised site, you're obviously losing some revenue in terms of the requirements they would need to comply with your requirements.
Yeah, so I'm not aware of any illegal sites. There's pop-up campsites across Wales where people join together and just set up a campsite, often without the landowner's knowledge. That's part of the issue. If there's landowners renting their field and earning money at it, they should provide all the facilities, sanitation being the main one, but a point for waste collection should be provided as well. If we come out and find obvious signs of a campsite and litter there, we speak to the landowner. They should have a trade waste agreement with us to pick that rubbish up if they are dumping it by bins. And that is the major concern for us in providing bins at lay-bys and on very rural locations. Across Wales, it's been shown that a lot of those types of facilities attract black bag waste, be it residents, be it campers, be it any other type thing. But because there is a bin there, people feel that almost justified in leaving black bags outside them. And it's great to see that the trial is working and there's a reduction in litter. The concern is rolling it out on a much wider scheme. We would see brand new sites for almost justified fly tipping as people see it. They see a bin, they think the council's picking the rubbish up from there, so they leave a black bag there. That, communal collection points, so setting up a communal collection point, a series of bins for campers to drop their waste in, doesn't address the problem that campsites should have a trade waste account. It's their responsibility. If they're making money out of it, they should pay to get rid of that waste, not provide a facility in the community to take that waste and fly tip it in a proper place. From a council perspective, we have a facility like that in Llanfoist. If campers, or if the campsites take the waste to Llanfoist, they can take it there and get rid of that waste properly. That's what the household waste recycling centres are there for, to dispose of that waste properly.
Even without the latest permit situation?
I think the permits will add issues to that, without a shadow of doubt. But if they're running a business from these sites, they should be paying for trade waste anyway. If it's people coming into the county, and there are a large number of second homes that are rented out, this causes a problem not just in Llanfihangel, Crewcorney, but across the county. They put their rubbish out on the weekend that they finish their stay, and they may not be having it collected until 2 weeks after. It causes a problem for us. We try and get hold of the owner of the property. We put signs up in the property with them, work with them, so that waste is contained in there. But I do understand that when you're coming in fresh into an apartment or a house or a cottage that you're renting for quite high value, you don't want to see someone else's waste sat in there waiting for collection. So I understand the issues they have, but they should also be paying for a trade waste collection. If they pay for a trade waste collection, we'll collect it weekly for them. If they're earning that amount of money and they want it collected daily, we'll collect it daily for them. We'll provide the service that they need, but I do understand that some people would rather just leave it out from the Saturday to the following Friday rather than pay us to collect it. And it's a bit about gathering evidence on our side as well. If that evidence is coming back that people are causing a problem, our waste education team will go out and speak with them.
Thank you, Carl. Councillor Guppy?
Yeah, just information really about the campsites. I'm not quite sure if these are ad hoc campsites or not, but if they're regular campsites, the Environmental Health Department deals with the licensing of the sites, and this quite strict policy that they have to sign up to, which Carl has added to the information. But if they're ad hoc, then it makes it more difficult. But if it is an established campsite, that's one way to get some advice and support, really.
Yeah, thank you. I think that our first step is through our community council to share our findings and see if they can help to solve this part of the problem. I do think Carl's made the point, or somebody has here, that because of the new permits and the new regulations, this is going to get worse if we can't tackle it. So, for instance, I know that people in the Groen Ivar Valley, which is where that photograph was taken, they have to go all the way to Brecon, I think, now, because they lie within Gwents. Is that correct? Powys, sorry. Powys, yeah. So the nearest one for them is now Brecon. So they're going to have to travel even further if they want to get rid of their household waste apart from the normal collection. So I think there's a key learning here that somehow we have to work together to address. Otherwise, the problem will get worse. I should say, even if they don't dump it by the bins, we've had rubbish dumped outside our house. So we've had what appear to be campers leaving the campsite on their day of departure, and because we happen to lie up, our house is on the road that they drive past, they'll put their bags outside our house. It's they've got to have some way of getting rid of them, haven't they?
Thank you. Roger, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. Only briefly, I've been chatting to David H. Jones as you've been talking. A campsite would require planning permission anyway. And if it involved caravan and camping, then that would require licenses, and they will deal with any complaints if any sites are left in a poor condition. So that's background to this issue. I suppose it's taking off in a bit of a direction, really, but nevertheless, if there are unauthorised campsites and they're tipping in there, it may well be an enforcement matter for us outside of the litter issue, quite honestly. They could be raising other issues as well. I stand to be corrected. I think some of the Groen Ivar is Monmouthshire as well. Is it? Yeah.
Thank you. I would just like to say it's lovely to see you both again, and thank you for coming back and visiting us and updating us. I'm definitely interested in hearing a little bit more sort of out of the chambers and maybe getting some ideas for you in my own ward. I think, oh, sorry, you want to, I'll let...
Sorry. I've been sitting here quietly listening,
Sorry.
if I may. I understood, if I can, sorry. I thought that use of land, 28 days, so that somebody could informally just drop in and use their land for camping for 28 days without any licence, any restriction. Anyway, I'm not worried about that because it does happen. People informally do. Years ago, I said to somebody, well, they were looking for a campsite. Well, okay, use my patch. We've got a garden. Fine. The site they actually we went to play cards, they actually chose us below our septic tank, which I thought it was fine. They were totally oblivious to that. So, I do commend your efforts. I really do, and your enthusiasm and the time that you're putting in. And then I'll be a complete whatever. I don't support your efforts because I fail to see why we should have to clear up after other people's slovenly behaviour. So I commend you, but I don't support you. And that's awful. Keep going. My local community council has expended quite a lot of money on some very smart bins, and they've put them out in rural areas. And I had some misgivings which have been proven when I drove past the one yesterday. It's now an attraction for residents from Torfine to dump their great plastic container and all sorts of stuff stacked around. It's a very nice sort of metal bin, black one, very attractive. So the local people are paying for a very attractive feature that's really shouldn't be necessary. What are people doing if it's on a walk, you've got something in your pocket, you continue with it and you take it home with you? So I find it difficult. Local people are in my ward paying tax to clear up, to provide facilities. And also thinking about if an area is clear, you're right, it seems to deter people from dumping because it is that much more obvious what you're doing. If there's nothing there on that ground, the dumping, it's a little bit more obvious and somebody might pick you up. And then going back to the force, I'm a nasty person because I really would like to see Monmouthshire setting a target of saying perhaps in the course of the next 12 months, we will ensure there are 12 cases that people financially pay for dumping litter within our area. So I do commend you in that way, but you shouldn't have to be doing what you're doing. I do it in my area. There's a ditch opposite to my home, and for some weird and wonderful reason, it fills up with strong bow cans. Now, who dumps those, I do not know, but I can probably scramble in that ditch this afternoon and pull out the best part of half a sack, at least, of Strongbow cans. So I commend you for what you're doing. Say, it'd be nice if you didn't have to do it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do you want to come back on that?
Yeah, just quickly. It's hard to disagree with most of that. Enforcement is, as I've said here, if we're going to go forward, I'm afraid then, and actually solve some of the problems that we're uncovering, an element of enforcement is absolutely crucial. We've considered buying cameras ourselves because we think at least now we know where to put them. We put them near our bins, and we catch somebody dropping bins, because that then becomes a fly tipping offence, which we think will be taken more seriously than a littering offence. But yeah, it's a key element, I think, going forward, and I'd love to see, as I said back in November last year, we would love to see some efforts to find people and catch people at it, because Monmouthshire has a very poor track record in that compared to other counties within Wales. I don't think that's changed significantly.
Thank you, Mr. Jackman. It's funny, I was listening to Radio 2 yesterday talking about campsites, and over 250,000 tents are dumped every year in the UK, and it's usually by the younger generation who are seen as environmental activists, as we've seen in the media recently. So it's how do we encourage that passion to become an everyday reality in their life, and we don't have that throwaway society. I think with regards to these unauthorised campsites, we are coming up to school leavers. In my own ward, we've got local farmers who do not allow children to camp on those sites, and it is where we get left with the Strongbow cans, the tents. So I think that's something we can all keep an eye out for members, and notify your community councils for stuff like that, because that's usually when we get the discarded bottles, particularly in my ward. I don't live in a ward where we have lots of visitors coming camping, but it's usually the younger generation, so maybe more interaction with schools. I think it's a good time to bring Carl in and to discuss the strategy moving forward. Is that okay, Carl?
Okay, so when we met in November, we discussed the litter strategy for Monmouthshire. We had a draft strategy. There was lots of good views came from the councillors and from the community group that we wanted to build into that strategy. Just after that, we had the announcement from Welsh Government that they were taking the funding away from local environmental quality. We used to get a grant of £115,000 a year. That disappeared completely, and we were told just after this meeting that that was definitely going to happen. So it's been a little bit of an hiatus on taking the strategy forward, not knowing what the budget is going to be for delivering any of the strategy ideas. Out of that, Welsh Government suggested that there should be a collaboration to look at LEQ issues. Keep Wales Tidy took that forward. The 22 Welsh local authorities signed up to it, and we now have a programme of work that has come from Keep Wales Tidy, the 22 authorities, and is about to be signed off, I hope, by Welsh Government with some funding attached to it. It's a much reduced pot, it's around £30,000 per year, but at least there is some money attached to it. So the idea from Keep Wales Tidy is a Carry Cymru campaign. It's Love Wales in Welsh, as opposed to Keep Wales Tidy, because many people feel that Wales isn't tidy. So what are we doing in trying to keep it tidy? So it's a slightly different message of love where you live and love Wales in general. So that's the approach they're taking. There seemed little point to us in championing on with our own litter strategy, when actually we need to piggyback on the back of a national strategy for Wales. So that's currently where we are with the strategy. We're waiting for the announcement that we've got our funding. We met with Keep Wales Tidy and Welsh Government a few weeks ago up in Builth Wells. The priority for this campaign, the Carry Cymru campaign, there's lots in there. It's a national collaborative campaign. They're setting up work with Cardiff Uni studentship for a PhD in behavioural change campaigning. These signs were provided to them by us as part of our work to say, can you look at which signs are the most effective? Is it the carrot? Is it the stick? What approach should we be taking? So that's one of the reasons for them wanting to talk to the Llanfihangel Crwconi group. The other things they're looking at is smarter enforcement. So they are pushing forward on the litter from cars issue. They want a way of prosecuting people who throw litter from cars, because that is a priority to all authorities. That's what they want to look at. But also what they're looking at is a national campaign to support the volunteer groups doing it, not to have an end-of-pipe solution with litter champions, but to stop the litter in the first place, which I think is where Councillor Smith was coming from and your own group is coming from. It's about stopping that litter. Enforcement is an important part of that. They recognise that now. They've steered clear of enforcement in the past to keep Wales tidy, but they have recognised that it's an important part, and they are looking at a national enforcement campaign. So all of that work is going ahead. It all dovetails into our strategy, or our strategy dovetails into that. So once we've got all that information of where their priorities are, that's when we will finish off our strategy to align to those priorities. At the meeting in Builth Wells, what they said their priorities were verge side litter, which is an important one because in the past it's been town centre type litter. We have a strong presence in the town centres of litter pickers. We don't have a strong presence in the rural communities and on the verge side. So their priority is verge side litter this time. Dog fouling remains a priority because it's a priority for the residents and everyone else. And fly tipping is an obvious priority now because lots of the other authorities are seeing an increase in fly tipping. And as we move to more regulated or more regulation on our civic community sites, either to drive up to recycling or to reduce our costs, there is the risk, always the risk that we will see increased fly tipping. So that's where we are with our strategy. We're just waiting for confirmation of the funding from Welsh Government through Keep Wales Tidy and then back to us. And then we will align our priorities within the strategy to their priorities. But as I said, it was decided on the day, it did need to get confirmation from Welsh Government, that the three main priorities for them will be verge side litter, dog fouling and fly tipping. So I see that being a natural link into the work that Llanfihangel Crwconi group has done. We've had some complaints about the signs, some people commenting it, not about whether they're too harsh, it's just that there's signs in rural areas and people just don't like seeing signs being put up in rural areas because it detracts from the hedgerow. I agree, so does litter. Detracts from the hedgerow in my opinion, but people don't seem to see litter in the same way. We've also had some queries from the National Parks Authority about putting bins out in areas without their agreement. But from the Llanfihangel Crwconi Group's perspective, I know that they contacted the National Parks about litter and what they could do, and then the National Park said it's an authority decision. So the National Parks didn't seem to want to be very involved with it until the point that people complained about the aesthetic of it. So that's another area that we have to manage. It's not something that we considered as a real issue. Putting bins out normally is not something that we're overly concerned about, other than they become a bit of a fly tipping hot spot, as you've said. So this is all an area that we want to look at in the strategy. We also want to share in the findings from the Llanfihangel Crwconi Group. 25% to 50% reduction in litter is massive in what we're trying to deal with. If we could see a 50% reduction in litter across the county, that would save us a lot of money. So upsetting a few people for the greater good may be something we have to do. So, but it will certainly be included as part of our wider strategy. And as soon as Welsh Government provide confirmation of the funding and what they're going to provide funding for, we will finish off our strategy aligned to that. There's no difference in our strategy to what Wales is trying to provide. What we don't want is a strategy of motherhood and apple pie of we are trying to reduce litter. We are all trying to do that. What we have to come up with is how we're going to reduce litter, and that's what the important part of the strategy is for us. How are we going to do it, and how are we going to fund it? So that's an update on the strategy.
Back in, Mr. Jackman, or you?
Yeah, just a couple of questions, I suppose. And they're things that we talked about in November, which were part of, I thought, were going to be part of the strategy. One of them was about training wardens and CSOs, was it, to hand out fixed penalty notices? Has anything happened on that? That was the first question. Do you want me to ask the second at the same time? And the second was, there seemed to be there was a very good discussion back in November about partnering with local businesses, trying to get them to fund campaigns, because it's very much in their interest that they're not seen as bad for the environment. In our area, McDonald's litter is a large part of the problem. Other fast food outlets also, and we were successful in getting some money out of McDonald's for some of the bins. I'm sure if the county approached some of these businesses as part of a bigger strategy, then those businesses would want to be part of it. So has anything happened on that? Have any efforts been made?
Okay, so the enforcement wardens, we've done training of all the staff. We did some training for the enforcement wardens as well. They're predominantly the enforcement wardens were brought in for parking offences and off-street parking. That obviously that will decrease over time. That we hope that will decrease over time. The focus on that as people stop illegally parking, and then they will move into the litter and other local environmental quality issues and deal with those. What we know is their uniform, the fact that they're on the street, in the town centres, people are already doing the right thing. So if you see someone walking perhaps not on the parking side, but if you see somebody walking towards you with a uniform on, you're less likely to throw litter on the floor. That doesn't allay the concerns from a rural perspective. We're not doing parking enforcement in lay-bys around Llanfihangel Crwconi, so we're not in those areas to deal with it. The noise from Keep Wales Tidy was about looking at a national enforcement campaign where it's dealt with at an higher level, and they bring in some kind of litter enforcement. So it isn't at a local authority level, it's done across Wales, so there's more consistency. I don't know where they are with that, and I don't know whether it'll be supported by Welsh Government, but I'm keen to hear where they are with that as well. The work with businesses, again, and it seems like I'm blaming the lack of funding and the Keep Wales Tidy bid for all of this. I see the Keep Wales Tidy bid as a really positive step. It's a good thing. We need it. We need a national campaign. They have said that they would like to approach businesses on a national level. So rather than having local support from McDonald's and your Brains pubs and your Costa coffees and the subs and Subway, and at a national level, they would like those organisations to support Wales across the board and then share out the money equally, rather than some of the rural communities that haven't got these facilities in their area but suffer with the problem. They would rather share that money out equally across the board. So they've said they'd like to do a national campaign rather than piecemeal, which, you know, to a certain extent hasn't worked in the past. 22 local authorities, all doing similar but not exactly the same things, hasn't particularly worked in reducing litter across the board. And so Keep Wales Tidy approach is the right approach, but as with everything, the more bureaucracy you put in there and the more people that you involve, the longer these things seem to take. So we are keen to work with businesses. Keep Wales Tidy would like to have the first bite of the cherry with them at a national level to see what we can do, and then filter it down the best approach to getting businesses on board with us.
Roger.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Perhaps just to elaborate a little on the enforcement officers. When we appointed the enforcement officers, we called them, rather than civil parking enforcement officers, their role is to be wider, civil enforcement officers. And we've had meetings with heads of service to look at what areas we may extend their role into in the future, and that particularly highlighted environmental issues, and this would be one of them. But I have to highlight that you still haven't got a significant resource. You had 3 car parking wardens before. You now have 6 civil enforcement officers, and they are to be funded by civil enforcement fines, income from that. So in the first instance, they will be concentrated in that area, but hopefully and ideally the intention is to have a resource which we could be using wider. And that may be about planning or highway contraventions, and also the environmental issues as we're discussing here. But in the first instance, I think members will appreciate the priority is to address the on-street and off-street parking issues.
Thank you.
Sometimes I think that this county is far too nice and far too kind, because my jaunt through Usk this morning, I've had to drive through Usk this morning and roundabout, I reckon you could have made quite a good catch. How can we have a policy, and the police also have policies and whatever, and you can find a vehicle that is parked on double yellow on the pavement outside the police station?
Thank you.
I feel better now,
Do you want to go back quickly?
Only very briefly, the police no longer take on that role, and that's why the authority has taken up that role. And quite frankly, the level of enforcement comes down to the level of staff which you can afford to do it. And the more enforcement you bring in, your income drops. I wouldn't be at all surprised if you don't get to a position at some point in the future where if you find the people enough times, they will eventually learn that actually your income then becomes an issue to you.
Down and down.
Yeah.
But then you won't need so many. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you all.
Can I just have a clarification? The enforcement officer's got communication if residents phone the one-stop shops or the hubs in view of parking issues.
Yeah, the enforcement officers will have communications.
They've got the radios.
They will, however, not be directed by members of the public. They'll be directed by their manager.
And can that be via the one-stop shop?
Well, it'll be directed by the service manager who's just been appointed. He'll be in position soon. But at some point, we have to get to a stage where members are offering us some guidance in how they would like to prioritise and use it. At the moment, they've started where traditionally they have been, town centres and the like. They may well get out to Esk and other towns in the future, but they are covering off off-street parking, which we've previously done, predominantly where there is a charge, because in some of your car parks they are free. But they will also at the same time be addressing on-street. Now they started actually charging last week. So up until now, the last few weeks, they've been putting out what we've called polite notices to try and educate people. The money is now kicking in at this point. But they will be directed through their manager, but we need to speak to members at some point after this has been established. We're still recruiting, quite frankly. We haven't been able to recruit all of the posts. But when we've got it in and established, we'll need to come back to you and say, this is how we're working at the moment. Do you wish to see it used in a different way?
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Dovey.
Thank you, Chairman. And can I apologise for being late? I had something that conflicted in Chepstow, which I had to go to. With regard to the parking, is there a means by which the wardens, I don't know what we're going to call them, are they going to be called wardens or officers? Well, is there a means by which they, somebody could contact a central point, if you like, and where there is blatant parking, and they could be given an instruction or an indication of what is going on. In Chepstow, parking is absolutely, epidemic at the moment. It's a huge issue. You've got people, for instance, parking on the pavements outside Francis's old office, and they're there all day. They park even in the narrow streets behind Barclays Bank, between Barclays Bank and the Rifleman's Way, with Greggs. They've got a system going with Greggs where people you'll have 2 or 3 there, and when one moves up, another moves in behind. They sort of shuttle up between them. But they do it professionally, almost. But it is a huge issue, and we really need to have people about that are really visible and know there is going to be some action. Maybe I'm going on a bit, having come in a bit late, but it is a huge issue in Chepstow. And wider than the town centre, might I say.
Madam Chairman, rather than necessarily straying down the civil parking enforcement route, would you like a report brought to a future meeting, perhaps?
I think so. I think that'd help members. I think it's clear to see that enforcement is required. However, it's not the only way we're going to tackle littering. I think education and maybe some of the trials that you've raised, I think rolling that out, I'd like to do something similar in my ward, works. Just, do we have a lead time with regards to Welsh Government's decision and with this Keep Wales Tidy strategy?
February just gone.
No, sorry, on this new one that you've just mentioned then. February.
Just gone.
But they've rejected that, did they not?
They've brought it forward. Announcement was supposed to be February.
Yeah.
It's just rolled on.
Okay.
I think they're hoping to get it out in July.
July, okay. Would it be worth us coming back with Criconi if they'd be happy to discuss going forward, how we'd like to tackle it and what exactly we can do and how we can support them? Yeah, okay. Do we also want to review once the permits are rolled out? Because obviously you've suggested that you think that will increase issues of fly tipping and littering. So I think if we do that together, you happy with that?
Yeah, we'll be monitoring fly tipping. We'll carry on monitoring fly tipping across the other 22 local authorities that have brought in similar interventions. They haven't seen an increase in fly tipping. At some point, there is the risk that if everybody from all the other authorities were bringing their waste to Monmouthshire, because we had the most lax regulation in place, fly tipping may start. But we'll monitor that going forward, and we'll work with the individuals. For the people, you know, and the Groiney Valley is a very good point. Those people do live closer to the site in Abergavenny than they live in Powys, but they still pay Powys their council tax, and it's what we can afford as an authority to provide our services. If we can't reduce the costs on the sites, the potential is that we will have to close sites. That is exactly the same issue then, not just for Powys residents, but for our residents as well. So it's a very balance of what we can afford to provide for everybody else against what we need to provide for our residents. Okay.
And can I ask the group, if you do find unauthorised camping sites, we're talking farmers allowing people to rent, would you actually share that information with Roger's team? Would you be happy to?
Anonymously.
Ask a straight question. I think we need to go to our local council first on that, if that's all right, just because we don't know who they are, and all we have at the moment is a load of black bags dumped at our bins. Finding out where they've come from is quite difficult, and proving it is even harder. So we'll share the results of the trial with the local council, because there are some local learnings as well. And we're also going to try changing the signage on the signs themselves, on the bins themselves, because I do think sometimes a little nudge, a little reminder that orange bags only, you know, a simple message like that is, and that anything else will be treated as fly tipping, that might be enough.
Thank you for joining us today. If everyone would like to take a 2-minute toilet break. Yeah, thank you. Okay, are we all ready to start again? Okay. Okay, thank you all. So Hannah, would you like to present the apprentice, graduate and intern strategy report?
Okay, thank you, Chair. My name is Hannah Jones, Youth Enterprise Manager, Monmouthshire County Council. Thank you for your time this morning. I'm here to present the draft apprentice, graduate and intern strategy for the local authority. I've been working closely with colleagues within the local authority and people services in developing the strategy to capture the current landscape in Monmouthshire and look at future developments. So here I'm here to inform you of the proposal. We're looking to a creation of a AGI coordinator post to oversee and support me in the implementation of the strategy. The strategy then we take into Cabinet for approval on the 3rd of July. Just to pick up some key issues really, the Council hasn't currently got a strategy in place, so this is a new strategy. And we feel it will bring assets to the organisation and benefit to existing business in the organisation and workforce. We've identified a need for a coordinated role to support the actions and priorities within the strategy, to support an identification and creation of new posts across the authority to support current and future skills needs, to set up and manage a comprehensive quality monitoring system to ensure that we offer the positive experiences within the local authority and the expectations of the training packages on offer, and to increase the higher level of and more diverse range of training opportunities to new and existing employees, and to promote the value of apprentice, graduates and intern opportunities within the local authority. We currently have 15 apprentices in the local authority, as you see from the report, the service areas they're in. I can't give a number of graduate officers currently. We do have graduate posts within the local authority, but they're recorded in a different way how we've defined them in the strategy. So this is something we'll be looking at. As you'll see, the posts currently are quite limited in terms of the sectors, and we wanted to expand this and have conversations across the authority in all service areas to look at a more diverse range of opportunities. You'll see from the report that Appendix 2 is the Equality and Future Generations evaluation, and we clearly feel that the strategy will have a positive impact on our wellbeing goals. In particular, Prosperous Wales provides skills, growth, alternative training and education opportunities in developing wealth through increased job creation and improved career prospects. You'll see we've looked at the options. Obviously, if nothing does happen in taking the strategy forward, we've identified the risks in terms of no local authority leads, sort of limited support with career progression pathways, and the loss of this opportunity in developing this, particularly around the wider landscape with the city capital region developments going on, and we feel this will be an opportunity to link into those. Reasons, as I said, the national approach, alignment to the employability plan in Wales, where the employability plan from Welsh Government sets out some key priorities in preparing for a radical shift in the world of work, responding to current and future skills gaps, and providing a personalised approach to employability support. Within the strategy, it talks around the new and existing partners, linking with ePrentice, the shared apprenticeship scheme, Capital City deal, as I said, training providers, our business community, working together to assess future skills gaps, labour market demands, and promote regional training and employment opportunities. The work will be led by myself, supported by a coordinator through the lifetime of the strategy. And it's picking up on key, in terms of professional development, key progression routes and sustaining career pathways. So that's everything from the report. Is there anything you'd like to pick up from the strategy?
Thank you, Hannah, for this. I think we've got several questions. Councillor Smith, go first.
How many applicants do you actually get at the moment? How many approaches does the council actually have?
We've got a number of posts that have been out. Apprentice. If you look at apprentices posts, because that was the field of responsibility.
No, not the actual posts.
Yeah.
How many individuals actually approach this council with a view to becoming involved in one of these schemes? And how do we actually deal with those individuals? So the number.
Okay. So we have, when we put out vacancies, we have people apply to posts. It can depend. Sometimes we have a flurry up to 30 candidates. Sometimes we may only have 10 candidates. We've approached by, we have emails through our generic Monmouthshire County Council from students for placements, for internships.
So are you including those?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so we're looking at something like 30 people applying.
Yeah.
Over what times?
We're looking at over an annual basis. Yes, yeah. Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, just needed to wanted Chairman to clarify in my mind how many approaches were made to the council. So thank you very much for doing it over the year. And then you progress as to how you actually deal with that. But it looks as if you get approaches from approximately 30 individuals over the course of a year.
Yes,
okay?
yes.
Thank you. Councillor Harris?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't particularly hear very much what Val was saying, unfortunately, but I'll go on with my questions, and if they overlap, we'll have a double dose, if you know what I mean. I didn't realise that we had internships, to be perfectly honest. It's something that hasn't come across my radar, and I think internships, we need to be very careful there, because we can be ultra exploitative if we're not careful. What concerns me on the internships in particular is that we don't know how many we've got, and therefore, by definition, I'm assuming we don't know where they are, but as far as I see, service managers do, but so they should know how many they have got. So why we don't know is a bit of a mystery to me. The other thing is, I see on page 50 of the electronic version, page 44 of ours, on the page Hours, Pays and Conditions, intern positions are treated as a period of work experience and do not come with a formal salary. That's the trouble as far as I'm concerned. It is at the service manager's discretion whether interns can claim expenses relating to the work they are doing, such as travel claims allowance. That worries me very much as well. We need a policy saying if you've got expenses, you should be able to claim for them. I don't like that. If the manager doesn't like you, maybe he won't pay you. That's the inference. Also, we don't know how many graduate jobs seemingly we have. And I'm just worried that we'll be endorsing this document to go to the Cabinet, not knowing 2 or 3 of the crucial bits that are actually in there. And it doesn't seem to me very difficult to find that information. So I'm hoping that by the time this goes to Cabinet, if we do endorse it, that information can be found out so they know exactly what they are talking about, endorsing the fact that we're going to spend 65,000 over the next 2 or 3 years. So I'm sure these things are easy to find, but if we don't find them in time for this going to the Cabinet, then it won't get my endorsement. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. You okay to come back, Hannah?
Yeah, can I come back? Picking up on the internship point regarding travel expenses, and I'm picking up on it. It is. We've been working closely with Owen regarding the volunteering policy, looking at the volunteering policy, and some points in there which I feel could link with the internships, and I think we need to. That is an area we would expect to pay expenses as we would follow as it's described in the County Council volunteering policy. So that I think definitely needs to be amended. As you read it out quite clearly, then I didn't sit happy with me either. Yeah. Okay. Yes, so that will definitely be amended, Councillor Harris. Picking up on the point in terms of the graduates, we have been doing some digging in departments. So I think we can come back with a figure, but the figure is as it currently stands, and it'll be a different definition to what's been defined in the strategy. So if I give you an example, we've looked quite closely at the pilot scheme the City Deal are offering to private sector at the moment, and they're working closely with the universities in South Wales, where they're targeting graduates fresh from university in offering working with businesses in offering a 6-month placement, and with that alongside a qualification. So when I had some discussion with service areas, some graduates that are currently in the authority have been in the workplace for some time, so they haven't come straight from a university. They've worked in a different sector. So it was, when we looked at it, it wasn't as clear cut as when we looked at the data from People's Services for apprentices, if that makes sense. So we can give some figures. I know that I had conversation with Matt from Legal, who's recently taken on some legal graduates, and there's a graduate in estates. So I think it's kind of defining that a bit better. And when I looked at it, it looked a bit clunky to where we were. So I'm in a way, I'm glad you've picked it up again, because it sat with us for a while and we was looking at how we could take it forward. So I'm quite happy for us to look at that again before Cabinet and perhaps make some amendments.
Chair, if I just come back. Good to hear that. The other thing is, as you've heard already, internships and exploitation worries me. How have you got records of how successful some internships have been, from the point of view of, wow, you've done a good job, you've done it free, here's a nice job for you because we think you're good, or thank you very much, that was nice, bit of free labour, now shove off, or worse to that effect, putting it crudely.
Thank you, and I think the way you've put it across is the way we're very mindful of this, and how how we take this forward is very much in speaking to service areas, working up a profile, looking at specific projects, and we don't want to get into the domain that you've raised. It is a new area for us development. We could have just looked at a strategy purely around apprentices, as other authorities have in place. I have looked at examples in England, and I have taken some advice from the authorities. So the internship element will be worked up very clearly, and we do not want to get into the domain that you've raised, really. So it's going to be very carefully managed. I've had one inquiry from a student. I'm speaking to other authorities whether we will take that forward for November. But got to make sure as an authority we've got that clear offer in place for that experience, because we do not want to get into that.
Thank you. Councillor Eason.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Roger's expressed most of the points that I think we both concur on, but I'll take you back to 7.2 where you talk about the apprentice shared apprentice scheme, which I'm fully aware of, where you say you've got 15 apprentices. Are those 15 apprentices with the apprentice, or are they with other bodies? And equally, when you're taken on as apprentice through this particular scheme, you get paid the appropriate rate for your age within the scheme, and you progress with your age. I'm fully aware of that because I am aware of one young lad who was an electrician, is now working for Mellin. And that young man was paid an appropriate rate while he was carrying out the apprenticeship. Do you see the internship fitting in to that sort of scheme whereby they would get something for what they're doing, certainly subsistence or whatever is needed, because I don't think it's right that people in this day and age should be free labour. And equally, I'd like to see the point you're making that you've got Matt Phillips involved in some of the legalities. I would like to see what you put forward to us today to be deferred before it goes to Cabinet, to come back to us and maybe go to Cabinet in September, so we can dig in a bit more into the points that Roger's making, that I'm making, because I feel that whilst you can go away and make amendments, I praise what you brought to us today, but I think it's incomplete. I think you need to come back to us with some of your thoughts and perhaps some feedback from Matt Phillips on the legal aspects of what we're doing, and possibly defer this until an appropriate time.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Easton, for picking up on those points. The 15 I talked about were employed with Monmouthshire County Council, so not in terms of apprentice. If you feel that we need to do some more work on the strategy and defer it, I'm quite happy for that to happen, because we want to get it right, and that is important to us as well.
Councillor Guppy.
Could we make that as a proposal, Chair, when we get to the end?
Thanks, Hannah. I welcome this policy that we're looking at today, and particularly with apprenticeships. My experience of students applying for apprenticeships is that they apply and then wait and wait and wait, and if they've had interviews, wait and wait and wait. And I just request that we have a timeline that the applicants have when we're putting out the apprenticeships, because it's astonishing how these students have to sit and wait for months to know the results. And I just hope that that's not going to be Monmouthshire County Council. And also, I think in view of formulation of a new post, I think it will evolve and bring great benefits for the apprenticeships or graduate apprenticeship, or the scope of students that are involved within this policy, and I welcome it, and the sooner the better. And if we can sort out the volunteers, or which Roger and Tony's brought up, I think the sooner the better. In view of it being brought up back in September, will that have an effect on putting out further adverts for students to start in September. That was sort of one question that, because we don't want to have to defer if something's all in line, and it is dependent on this policy going through before the summer.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Geppie. When posts are advertised within the authority, there is a timeline, as in with an apprenticeship post is the same as any other post, really. So they are advertised, candidates are interviewed, and they're given their feedback. So that system would still exist. Picking up on your point, we can continue support those service areas that are looking to put vacancies out, which is ongoing. I think the new area for development will be us looking at graduates and internships, and if the concerns you've raised, we want to get those right, really. With the post, we're looking at, within the document, you'll see there's a toolkit. So we feel we've met with our current cohort of apprentices in the local authority, and to get their views on how their experience is, how they feel the support is through their training provider, through their line manager. And we want to continue that because we are a supportive organisation. We want the best possible opportunities for our employees. So I think having the post is making sure that we can offer that support from the point of entering into the local authority and supporting future career pathways, whether it's within the local authority or outside with other partners, really. So, and I think this is why we feel that there should be that point of contact. And from discussions we've had with People Services, what happens now if a department is looking to take on an apprentice, People Services will say, come and have a chat with Hannah's team and look at how we can support that. So the work was already ongoing, but I think by having the strategy, it gives us a clear pathway of direction, and I think it will challenge us as an organisation as well, but we do clearly need to get it right from the beginning.
So just one other point as well, in view of tightening up of this, like the starting date, and I know Monmouthshire would normally, if they were applying for posts, they do a timeline, so other companies don't do. But in view of as a finishing point of the apprenticeship as well, a finishing date is stipulated, because I've had experience that area can be a bit grey, in which if they've successfully completed their apprenticeship, when was that ending date, in view of if they've continued to do work in the area, and what they get paid. And I think that's an area that that we take forward, and we're really strict on that apprenticeship, and every apprenticeship, maybe that for some reasons it has to be extended, but that the apprenticeship and the authority sort of look at that so that there's no grey area. It's black and white. That's when you'll end, and if something's not submitted, that's when you'll end, and that's when you will be taken into your post and paid properly. And I think then that will be very attractive to this authority, because sometimes the issues are very sensitive around pay, and if people shout loud and whatever, they would be wondering whether they've been taken on. But that's just my request. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. It is clear from the beginning the expectations coming in terms of the level of pay, the time frame for the qualification. And I think by having that investment with a post, we can clearly monitor that. I think you can see from the report, we want to make sure there is proper, robust quality monitoring in place, and looking at that progression for the individual is really important, and looking at from the time coming in on to an apprentice, where do they want to be. And from employability programs the team deliver currently, we always look at what are the aspirations for the learner, for the employer, it's really important from the start that they're clear on the expectations, and the line manager is as well. So we can have those discussions, and looking at the value of the apprentice with the team and the wider team as well is really important.
Thank you, Hannah. I think you had one moment. Sorry, Councillor Smith. As soon as I go to say, and then somebody has to put their hand up. Never mind.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. My apologies, Roger, for you not hearing my question. What I asked initially was how many approaches did the council receive, interested people, within the course of a year, I think we decided, and the number you were giving was 30. You made a reference then to Hannah's team. How many folks in Hannah's team, please? Just yourself? Right. Okay, that's fine. I thought, gosh, there's a whole body of support at the back there with Hannah's team. So the number of approaches, Hannah's team. Is there liaison with the college next door? Because this is their line of work, and I think it would be interesting to know if there is communication with Coleg Gwent, sharing of information, and the background they've got with timelines and such.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Through the strategy, we want to revisit the work with Coleg Gwent, because currently at the moment, as I said, inquiries come in daily or weekly and monthly, and I think through the strategy it'd be more of a coordinated approach where we can look at those pathways for students in terms of is that pathway going to be after year 1 of a course or year 2 or completion of course, or is there courses that we can put students on day release at the college and then they can have that experience here? That is an area for development which we want to pick up on really through the strategy.
I think that's critical, Chairman, because there's an expertise next door and a far bigger team than Hannah's team, which could be useful to you.
Definitely. Thank you, Councillor Smith. And I think what we want to do is have more engagement with our schools as well through the strategy. You'll see in the strategy there is actions that are through schools. Through the strategy as well, we've looking across the local authority where there's good work already going on with the talent lab and the qualifications that existing employees are undertaking. We've looked at the schemes that are run through social care and through social work placements. So we've tried to capture the whole of the whole picture, because otherwise we're not going to do it justice.
Anyone else? No? Okay. Thank you, Hannah.
Just a quickie. If we are saying go to Cabinet in September, when will we have a chance for Hannah to come back and say, these are all the wonderful things that we've improved, etc.?
Well, I would have discussed your work programme at the end of the meeting, but we can go back to that. But basically, your next meeting is on the 11th of July. You already do have 3 items on the agenda, so it's up to you if you want to add that to the 11th of July, because that will be your last meeting before the summer break. It just means you're going to have a longer meeting and you might need to have a break. Sorry?
A cabinet at the end of the month.
Yes. Yeah, so it just means...
Will Hannah have enough time by the 11th of July, to have addressed what we've been talking about? That's the important thing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm hoping that we can pull it together. What I would ask is if I can have the notes from this meeting to make sure I've got everything that I know I need to do as well, because I'm trying to listen and take notes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
On that one, Chair, I think we could have a report and read it. We know what we're looking for, so it's not going to take a lot of time.
Okay. Thank you, Hannah. You've had a lot of feedback there. So obviously Tony proposed that we defer it, comes back in July, and then it'll go to Cabinet in September. Everyone happy with that? Hannah will come back in July. She'll go away, make the amendment suggested by all of you, and then it'll come back to us in July, and then it'll go to Cabinet in September. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so we'll move on to item number 6, Welsh Language Monitoring Report, and Alan is here to present on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Pnawn da pawb. Oh no, it's not yet, is it? Bore da still. Sorry, got that wrong. Totally. A bad start. Hi, yes. I thought what I'd do initially, just do a very brief outline of why we do this particular document on an annual basis. I think it's my 21st since I've been dealing with the Welsh language for local authorities. So the recent legislation is called the Welsh Language Wales Measure 2011, and we've got to comply with 176 or so standards. So the standards are linked with service delivery, so it's correspondence, answering phones, invites to meetings, document signage, etc., and Welsh speakers on reception, that people can have a Welsh language service. Policy making, any new policies or proposals that we make, we need to make sure there's not an adverse impact on the Welsh language, or a positive impact as much as possible. Operationally, asking Welsh speaking staff, do they want their internal documentation in Welsh, policies, procedures and so on. We've done that. None of our staff wanted that, so that was fine. Record keeping, so keeping a record of our Welsh speakers, where they are, who they are, what level of skill they've got. We keep a record then of training courses that people attend. The number of complaints we receive, which thankfully are none. People tend to ring me if they've got an issue. They ring me personally and we try and deal with it like that. If it goes to the Commissioner, Commissioner's got a very formal process which takes about 3 months and it's a 10-step stage with a decision made at the end of it. So I'm glad that they ring me and we can sort things on a more informal basis. And there's a section at the end then which is supplementary, which is a variety of different sort of measures. So that's the background to what the standards are about, and we've had those in place probably about 2 or 3 years now. Then the actual report itself, which I've sent to you, obviously, it's looking at specific parts or specific elements of the standards. So the first one being legislative requirements. So that's in terms of translation. What do we need to translate? And then what do we do with Facebook and Twitter with bilingual tweets? And obviously our website, which has been for a number of years now, has been English and Welsh. We've got an element then called Managing Change. Bear with me a second. I've put in this particular area a practice piece of work we've been doing over the last couple of years with the assistance of HR and all managers. It's workforce planning. So it's asking managers to do an audit of the staff they've got, what skills have they got, what sort of roles are they in, and what training have they undertaken. Then meet the manager and discuss really what service they provide and how much they interact with the public. Because that's the key one, is the interface between the public and us as a service provider. And have we got the capacity to offer a Welsh language service? Well, we only got 31 fluent Welsh speakers out of, say, 2,500 staff. So I think probably you'd know the answer is that we do struggle on that particular area. But we look then at the gaps in services. And we have a fairly sort of proactive conversation regarding, are there any roles that you would think would be suitable for designated as essential? So actually appointing a Welsh speaker, or looking at desirable appointments and so on. So there's a number of issues when we do go down the essential route. Number one, it's not an easy one to get managers to agree to that, because there are difficulties in actually getting people to apply. And I think it's because of where we are in Wales and the expectation levels that Monmouthshire may not actually want Welsh speakers to work for them. Just historically, that it's a more anglicised area, but we have got 8,500 Welsh speakers, kids going through education every year. So we're going to have more and more people looking to work through them in Welsh. And I think that's part of what I need to do, is to go and say to school kids, well, actually, if you speak Welsh, you may have a job in the council in the future, be it here, Cardiff or Newport or wherever, or Torfaen, Blaen y Gwent. So it's a change that's going to happen slowly, but it doesn't really solve our problems in the meantime. We've got a requirement to have reception staff who speak Welsh. At the moment, we've currently, I think, got one. So we're struggling in terms of compliance with that. We've got people going on courses, so they've got the awareness, but you couldn't, as a Welsh speaker, go to reception in Monmouthshire and have a full-blown conversation. You would struggle to do that. So we need to be proactive in trying to improve those. So again, another thing, we've got a Welsh language line, which myself and a number of colleagues answer. So if you press, if you try and ring the council, you'll have an option to speak in Welsh or in English. So myself and David Barnes and a few others, we're the Welsh face of the authority. And we have a number of very interesting conversations with people that think it's great that they can ring Monmouthshire County Council and they can have a chat regarding their refuse or whatever service they've got an issue with. Refuse, actually, is a lot of it. Of late, Welsh speakers have been ringing up and we've sorted out their problems and their queries. So it's a good one because it's quite proactive. And interestingly, the people that do ring, they may not live in Monmouthshire, they live in Monmouthshire, but they've come from different parts of Wales. And that's a demographic in Monmouthshire that's like different to anywhere else in Wales. So we get the kids come to work in Cardiff, perhaps move to Monmouthshire then to live, or they work over the border in Gloucester or Bristol. And then grandma and grandpa, remember, key into key, moved down to the area to help with the childminding. And the demographic then, so we get an older population coming in, who then in the future may actually require social care. So it's an interesting one. I don't know whether it happens in other parts of Wales, but the demographic in Monmouthshire is certainly different. So Welsh language skills, so we got to tell the Commissioner the numbers we got in total per department. We advertise roles now. We got to do a Welsh language skills assessment with each vacant job. Do we need essential Welsh speaker, desirable or not required? There's very few really that are not required. If they don't deal with the public at all, I suppose that makes sense. But we've got to be careful when we do this. We had a cook in a Welsh school and it said Welsh not required. Well, desirable would have been fine with that they could use a little bit of incidental Welsh with the kids in the schools. So we're still working on that to try and sort of cut out any loopholes, so to speak. And then finally there's a list then about training, so the training we provide. And actually I'm going to be advertising that fairly shortly. It's open to all of yourselves as councillors. I know Councillor Eason is still cracking on with his Mynediad too. But it's a Mynediad, which is the is an entry level. We also do a 10-hour online. We offer something called Say Something in Welsh, which is free. All these are free, actually, apart from Mynediad, which comes out of my budget. There's Duolingo, which you might have heard of, to learn other languages. We're doing a two-day Welsh language awareness course in July, which I'm currently organising, which, again, it's totally fine for you to come along to that. And we've got staff going on a residential course as well. So there's quite a big offer there to try and upskill our staff. And the take-up is actually very good and very heartening. So that's a synopsis there of the document that goes to the Commission every year. And then they will come back to us then with any questions, any queries, and it's an ongoing dialogue. And eventually then we'll have a meeting and decide where we are in terms of compliance and so on. Normally we get on pretty well with them, so I'm hoping they'll be the same this year. So any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Thank you, Alan. Tony, you have a question? Would you like to?
Yorkshire. The course that I've been going on starts off with 12, 14 members of staff and dwindles down to 3 or 4 at the end, purely because their line managers don't appear to be in a position to allow them to carry on with the course because of work commitments. So if the authorities wants to encourage more Welsh speakers or more people to be able to learn the basics of Welsh, they must commit their staff to being able to do it. And this has been a problem that I've seen where they just cannot carry on with the course because of work commitments. There's one young lady, last couple of days, she's had to chop and change to do an exam tonight because she didn't get the commitment from her line manager. Now, the line manager's got a job to do, but equally, if the authority wants to encourage or needs to encourage, and I believe should encourage, they should also commit their staff who are doing it to the time off, or the time within work particularly.
I can't disagree with you at all on that. Having organised classes over the best part of about 21, 22 years, it's a pattern, unfortunately, that does happen. It's not... We're not the only authority that has this issue. It happens across all authorities. It's the balance between work commitment and somebody committing to learn a language. I don't know, and this is an honest comment, I don't know whether these particular courses are regarded in the same light as if you're doing another training course. I don't know whether Welsh language is not seen as being quite so important, but in fact, we've got a responsibility here to provide a service, and we're trying to develop Welsh speakers, so these courses are key to do. And I don't know whether they're seen as so important, and therefore officers will pull other officers from the courses. That's a personal comment, but I believe sometimes it's true, and we've got to be careful. We've got to show an equality with this particular course with others, because it is a course that is a skill that will allow you to provide a service. So that's my point of it.
I thought it was on. Your authorities paying for these courses to Coleg Gwent, and Coleg Gwent don't mind as long as they get the money. But the take-up within Monmouthshire is, in percentage, which is pretty good. And in terms of Welsh language provision across the east of Wales, Monmouthshire comes out very high with people who want to learn. Of course, the further you go west, the more people who want to speak Welsh, are speaking Welsh, don't need the courses. But I do believe that there's got to be commitment from the authority to assist these members of staff who are trying to better themselves in some respects.
Actually, you make a very good point there. The level of Welsh learners in Monmouthshire South East Wales, is the highest in the whole of Wales. Obviously, that's balanced by the fact there are more Welsh speakers in the Welsh-speaking areas. But going back to your point there, I think it's very fair point. I think I'm working quite closely with the college that we can get members of the public in to boost the figures. So if of course, the one in Mega, we've actually got 6, 7 members of the public there. So that gives you that continuity within the class. And they tend, because they paid out their own money, that they will attend come rain or shine. So that gives a sustainability to that particular class. And then we've got the officers then on top of that. So that's the way we're looking towards it. And also we've got accommodation that the public can come in and attend the classes. So it's hopefully going to work a little better.
Thank you. Is there any more questions for Alan today? Councillor Dovey?
is there a fine line with the provision that we have? Is there a fine line with between the people who come for the tuition, if you like, between those who come because they want to do it? It's, you know, they can speak English anyway adequately. They want to do it, or is there a difference between those who need to do it because they need the language, if you like? They perhaps don't speak English adequately. I don't know about this, and it might be a naive question, but I just wonder if there is a line there that somewhere.
I think I know where you're coming from. I mean, all hours are volunteers, so there's no. The line manager isn't forcing them to come. I know going back a couple of years ago, because we were very short on numbers, that we did encourage office managers to get their frontline staff to go to courses. But that actually worked well, because I think probably some of the staff didn't want to go, but they did attend and they did enjoy it. So the turnout and the attendance levels were really, really good. Since that provision has finished, all these people who applied to go on these courses have gone on there because they want to learn the language. Be it that they want to learn it because they feel it's something that's missing inside them because they're Welsh and they don't speak Welsh, or it could be they see the business sense for Monmouthshire to be able to communicate with the Welsh-speaking public in Monmouthshire, or it could be that this will enhance their career prospects. So there's a number of reasons potentially they're doing it, but there's no one forced to do it. So it works pretty well, yeah.
Does anybody else have any more questions for Alan? Councillor Guppy?
No, I've just wondered how often do you review your figures? Because you said there was 31 Welsh speakers in the county, employed by the county. I was sort of working in my head sort of what that would be when perhaps 20 from the two schools and 10 more. So, but I wasn't quite sure how you worked out that figure.
Yeah, no, good point. Actually, we don't, it's not including school-based staff. Not including school-based staff. So we got 31 who are fluent. It's a moot point, this. I don't know all the Welsh speakers in the authority, because if they don't tell me, or the line manager doesn't say we got a Welsh speaker just started, I won't know. So I tend to find out by accident, or if you see them start wearing these, you think, oh, you speak Welsh, do you? Yes, I do speak Welsh. So it's reliant upon line manager or a colleague saying, we know a Welsh speaker just started in Monovale Hospital. So I send them an email or I ring them and have a chat with them, and that's how I get hold of them, so to speak. But yeah, we don't include the school-based staff because we can't really do... With our staff, we can ask them to do potentially different things. So in terms of answering the phones, they could be sort of mentors and so on. With school-based staff, we can't really impact on what they do. So we keep it to the 31. The assessment of what is fluent and what isn't fluent is another issue, of course. Because you say to the person, "Go on, you speak great Welsh." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." "No, I don't. I don't feel confident." So you've got beginners, intermediate, advanced and fluent. You've got some of those intermediate are actually quite good speakers. There's a load of Welsh in their heads, but because they don't have much opportunity to speak it, they don't really improve their standards. And it's confidence. You know, if you've ever learned sort of French or Spanish, you know that unless you use it, you know, you're very reticent to use it, and because you don't feel comfortable, you feel embarrassed or whatever. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So, yeah, those figures, they're all approximate.
So coming back on that then, it sounds as though the authority is shortchanging on with this documentation saying that there's 31 Welsh speaker staff within Monmouthshire, and that's not accurate. Because if you're saying that it's not school-based staff, that's 20 more. Well, that's, what was it, 75% more than the figures that you're publishing, which you commented about Monmouthshire is the highest sort of county learning Welsh, but it's to be promoted. I don't think we should be downgrading the figures, and maybe, I don't know what the criteria, if that figure is by a set criteria or a set question, how many. But if it's not, I think possibly an email needs to go out to all managers of all employees, all schools, all everybody that comes into MCC to find out who exactly is Welsh speaking, whether they're fixed term contracts, full-time contracts, part-time, because I'm sure that figure is double the amount that's being forecasted. And I don't feel as though Monmouthshire should be downgrading itself and should be a celebration that it sounds like we have more staff, and significantly more staff, if you're not including the schools.
The information they require from this annual report is to do with, it doesn't include school-based staff, so this is accurate as far as it goes. The difficulty is that if someone doesn't reveal they speak Welsh, there's no way that anyone can know any different, because you only know if they spoke Welsh to you, because you can't. If you look at somebody, you've got no idea if they speak Welsh or not. And in fact, if they speak English to you, they may have the badge is the way, isn't it? I agree, absolutely. But you can listen to somebody speaking in an English accent and they're from Birmingham, but actually they speak fluent Welsh, because we got a number of them. So even from the English accent, you can't tell if they speak Welsh. They can have the most Welsh of accents, but they may not speak any Welsh. So it's a very difficult one. We do encourage annually to get people to upgrade their skills on the HR system. But again, some people, because they're not confident, won't tell us, and we unless they tell us, we don't know. So this is as accurate as I can get it from personal knowledge and linking up with colleagues, getting the anecdotal evidence from people saying somebody just started, they speak Welsh. We had a lady who works with GDPR. A colleague of mine from Caerphilly said, "You got someone's Welsh speaker starting next week." I said, "Who's that then?" And I went to see her then, and I gave her one of these, and we started speaking Welsh to each other. Whether she'd have come to me to say she spoke Welsh or not, I don't know. So it's a lot of it is anecdotal and more by accident.
What I'm saying is that it needs to be strengthened up, really, and I think HR, everybody goes through HR, and I think that needs to be a stronger process, so that we've got those figures, and the report, if it doesn't say school staff, I think that you should supplement that within the report, in addition to this report, because it doesn't mean you, this is what the report says, but it doesn't mean you can add extra. Thank you.
Yeah, that may well be a good idea, actually. I hadn't thought of that. And I think in terms of trying to get, it's always difficult to get people to fill stuff out online, because it's not just the Welsh language skills, it's in terms of all the protected characteristics from equalities as well, and some will answer them and some won't, and some will be proactive and some won't. So it's very difficult unless there's a 3-line whip from somewhere that says you must fill these in. But I think that's certainly that's something worth doing, because yes, every English medium comprehensive has got a Welsh department. Yeah. Okay.
Alan, can I ask you a question? Yeah. It might be a silly question, but surely we'd capture that information when we're recruiting here.
That's a good question. I think the trouble is, I think that information is confidential, because I think it's filled in on I might be wrong on this. There's no one here with HR experience, but there's a different form they fill in, and I think that goes separate. That is then separated from the application form, because it's included with the protected characteristics, so in terms of sexual orientation and disability and so on. That is separated, so there's no way of knowing that.
Maybe we need to review those forms. And maybe ask, are they happy for it to be disclosed to yourself and your team? So I'd imagine our numbers would go up dramatically. I think you're onto something there, Councillor Guppy, I really do.
I just think we've got the managers. Maybe if it's just a short exercise that all managers send out to emails to all staff and ask them to ask their staff whether they're Welsh speaking or not, so that we can capture it in view of you know, there's going to be a third. I was thinking of the primary schools, but there are Welsh staff, Welsh speakers in the secondary school. We've got 4 secondary schools. We have, you know, it could be 4 teachers, it could be 8 teachers. I just think maybe it's a small exercise. Give it a timeline, so for the information to come back and see what response we got. You can only do, but I do feel quite strongly that that email should go out, and all the senior managers get that information back and to feed you, because it might be that it's going to help you. You're only a small team anyway. Yeah, but in view of that there's going to be a third school being built in Monmouth, you know, it could help it and obviously celebrate the Welsh language.
I think that's a really good point. I'll have a chat with David Bartlett and see what we can do with this HR system, because we should be able to use this information to assist us. I think it's I don't know, sometimes some of these systems actually don't help us.
Even if we can't, I think, you know, beside that, and it might be using that system as well, but in the meantime, you know, send out a flyer, you know.
Thank you, Orders. Oh, Councillor Devi.
Just a last question. With regard to the schools, there's a change in demographic within the schools. I guess it's more noticeable in Chepstow School at the moment. Is that going to have an impact on, do you think it's going to have an impact on what we will need to provide in the schools on a uniform basis, or will it be, stronger needed in some areas and not in others? I'm trying to get how we're going to monitor the need, because we've got in Chepstow School now a lot of people that come from Bristol and whatnot, you know, and that in the main there is no demand at the moment for those extra pupils to speak Welsh. And the other thing I'm concerned about, if you're going out and you're going to ask staff whether they speak Welsh or not, are you going to make that mandatory, or is it of their choice to reply?
Right, remember that second question? I'll answer your first one. Yeah, people coming in from Bristol, it's going to change the demographic, but they're still going to learn Welsh because it's part of the syllabus. So they got to learn it. So if they come into Wales, they got to learn the language that is put before them, just as we would if we went to France or Germany or Italy. So there's no difference. I suppose it depends on what age they come in. But if they come into English medium and then have to learn Welsh, they'll need some assistance to get them up to speed. I mean, some will embrace it, some won't embrace it, some won't like it, and some will like it. You're going to get a variety of responses from them, but they got to do it because it's the syllabus. And going back to the second one was to do with, well, they don't have to reveal anything in terms of asking about protected characteristics or Welsh language skills. They don't have to tell, you know, we've got a duty to ask them in terms of protected characteristics. And also in terms of asking, we ask them in terms of their Welsh language skills. They don't have to answer any of those legally. So hopefully they'll be proactive and want to reply and give a decent answer. But we can't really force the issue. Unless the Chief Executive says, come on guys, let's get some decent data. So.
I think on that, it's how you deliver the message. If we're talking dealing with employees, I think if we put something together and the way we ask them and, advise why we need to know this information, and, you'd only benefit the council, I think the vast majority of people would be willing to share that information, but obviously they're entitled to a choice to not disclose it as well.
And also, it's a very good point, actually, and there are some people, unlike myself and a lot of my colleagues, I love speaking Welsh. And if someone wants me to do something in Welsh, I'll be there, I'll do it. Some who are not that confident, perhaps in themselves, either with their language skills or as a person, may not be comfortable doing that, so they hide in the background. And others think they're actually going to get extra work doing it. But to me, I've done extra work in Welsh, and it's a pleasure. But not everybody is like that. So there's many reasons why people either reveal or don't reveal they speak Welsh, and we can't generalise on it. I think it's down to the individual, a lot of it. It's how they're built and how they're wired up, I suppose.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, so there was two things that come out of that. Tony was slightly concerned that employees were not getting the right support from managers to commit to courses, yes? And secondly, we need to identify Welsh speakers within the local authority. I don't know how we go about working that, but
I can do that.
yeah, are you happy to take that forward and work with HR and managers? And I think that's a good point, Linda. I really do. Thank you. Okay, right. Are we happy to move on? Thank you ever so much, Alan. Pleasure. Always a pleasure. Just quickly, I made an error. I forgot to announce apologies. Sorry, Wendy.
Sorry, I thought that would be a really good opportunity then. Apologies from Councillors Clark and Webb.
And item 7, to confirm minutes of the previous meeting. Are you all happy with the minutes? Is there anything you'd like to raise on the minutes? Can I have a proposer? In a second. Lovely, thank you. Councillor Eason, Councillor Smith. And item 8, action list. Shall I hand over to you, Hazel?
There was only one clear action there, Chair, which was in terms of work programming to schedule an annual performance report for the Registrar Service. It was a new service that came to us. It's the first time we scrutinised it, so we said we'd like to see that back annually. I think the other things that were agreed at that meeting were in terms of the agenda for today. So if I can take you on to the work programme, I've updated, whilst we're here, some of the things that you've mentioned today. So, for instance, your next meeting, you'd like to include the apprentice, graduate and intern strategy, albeit it'll be a shorter, probably, scrutiny than you've had today, because you understand the context. But what you've also got on that meeting is the modern-day slavery protocol. Now, some of you will recall that we had a workshop that was led by this committee in which we invited all members and we considered modern-day slavery. Do you remember we had a presentation from David Jones and Diane Chorister? So the key outcome of that workshop was that we asked them to go away and prepare a protocol which is sort of multi-agency and is very clear with references, who to contact and so forth. So that's ready to come to us in July on the 11th as well. Also, we've got a piece of work on the corporate plan and the annual report. So basically, the corporate plan, it's to set out for you, to help you to identify future work programme items. I've been through quite a lot of the items on the corporate plan and noted which ones have been through scrutiny and which ones have yet to come. One of them that you've raised before is air pollution, so we've scheduled that to come back later in the year, but it's useful to have a look at the corporate plan and just make sure that we're on track with the things that we're scrutinising and we're looking at the right areas. And also on the 11th of July, you've got revenue and capital outturn report. So usually we'd limit our meetings to about 3 items per meeting maximum, 2 preferably. You've got 4 there. How you'd like to deal with that is up to you, but I would suggest either you have a longer meeting. I'm guessing there's probably not much favour for a special meeting in July. So just for you to be aware that that would probably be a longer meeting and we'd need to book the room for a little bit longer. Also in the work programme, we've got the return of the traffic and road safety and speed management process. Now, there's no date confirmed for that yet, but I believe that officers are finalising that work and looking to bring you that. It'll probably be back in the new cycle, so September onwards. And yeah.
With regard to that item, Chairman, could we receive whatever document we're going to receive at the meeting? Could we receive it in quite a long way in advance of the meeting? Because I seem to recall it had a lot of pages.
Yeah.
And I think we really, as a scrutiny committee, want to work that thoroughly and properly.
I think that's important because you've worked on that piece of work for several years. It's a long time coming. So, I mean, if we did schedule a special meeting, perhaps in September, because you've got your regular meeting on the 26th of September, we'd be aiming for that document to be ready several weeks in advance so that we could send it to you and you've got plenty of time to look at it.
Also has a point to make.
Okay.
Thank you. Well, you've answered my question really about the speeding meeting, which I think has ground to a halt personally. But on the 11th of July, is there an error there? That's not Francis Taylor. Surely it's Francis O'Brien.
Yes, it was an error.
Yeah. I know she was on the radio last night about the M4 Relief Road, or the lack of the M4 Relief Road, but I didn't think she was on there. Yeah, the terms about the speeding, I feel that we're going nowhere with that, to be quite honest.
Just to comment that we have chased it up. The new chair and the former chair, who's now the responsible cabinet member, work hasn't stalled. It's been very much ongoing, but it's been brought to a final sort of conclusion. And I think there was a strong feeling from both the former and the current chair that needs to come back through the scrutiny process before it goes ahead for a decision. Your next meeting that would be after that would be the 26th of September. You've already got on that agenda the Rights of Way Improvement Plan, which from previous scrutinies you've taken some time upon. So you've also got budget monitoring. I'd suggest you don't add any more on that agenda really. We've also suggested this morning that we would have the litter strategy to return once the national strategy has been sufficiently developed, and we would invite Criconi Environmental Group back. And Carl has suggested that ties in nicely with discussing the waste collections policy at the same meeting because it's interlinked. So you'd be looking probably at a special meeting early October on that, because you don't have a meeting in October. You've got the 26th of September and then the 7th of November. So the suggestion would be a special in early October for those items. So I think that's taken forward the things that you've suggested today, Chair.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. Okay, and then we've got the...
Sorry, were we going to have about the traffic wardens, enforcement officers, were we going to get some feedback? I think Roger said that he wants views of members, so I don't know if that's going to be in the form of report in view of, it seems as though the public can't request for these enforcements and they're going to be put in hot spots. I just wonder how to take this forward in view of...
Chair, can that go to the special meeting we're looking for in September?
Well, You've already got a special meeting which would be on the speed management policy. I think you're going to need the whole meeting for that.
Yeah.
I would say the civil enforcement parking
Yeah.
might be better to be a subject of a members' seminar, because there's going to be a lot of wider interest
Okay.
in that.
All right.
So I mean, we can put that forward as a suggestion for a seminar.
Just sort of
I
put
did-
it on and sort of perhaps not apply a date at the moment.
Yeah.
Just to keep it, because it's a bit in its infancy at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
I'll ask Roger what the sort of suggested timescale would be if we were to run a seminar, but I think it would be probably
It most would
for wider
yeah.
members.
And it's most going to be a couple of months for it to embed in view of
Yeah.
how it's being managed and how it needs to be reorganised. Thanks.
And then item 10, Cabinet and Council Forward Work Programme. Is there anything in there that you'd like sight of? Yes. Tony, please.
Sorry, go back to the item we had on graduates. It's going to go to the Cabinet in the appropriate time, but I'm a little perplexed that it seemed to come to our committee out of the blue, really, in some respects of the content. I'm asking Hazel's advice on this. Should that go to JAG as well?
I'm not sure if it should go to JAG after this. We can check that. One of the reasons why perhaps you might think that you're not that familiar with the subject area is traditionally Economy and Development Select have looked at some of the sort of apprenticeship and skills work, particularly when we've talked in terms of City Deal. But I think because this was sort of a wider strategy with the graduates and the interns, we thought perhaps it would fit better with this committee. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I do apologise, Dave. You'll get a report on the burials and cremations. Okay? It's not an issue that's been forgotten by the team.
Thank you. So obviously the next meeting's going to be a fairly long meeting. It's got 4 items on the agenda. Are we all okay with that? Okay. Thank you ever so much. Do we have the date and time of the next meeting?
11th of July.
11th of July. We'll see you all then. Thank you ever so much.